Do I have a very, very, very good, insightful, data-based, good, very good video for you guys? What is up, Finn fans? Happy Monday. No training camp today or tomorrow. Miami's getting a little bit of a rest after a full weekend of training camp, but I got to sit down with Warren Sharp, a very awesome human being. First off, for giving me the time. We talked for like 25 minutes. We could have talked for more. Very insightful, very great data. He has this book that you need to check out. It's a preview of the 2025 season. We talk about it at the very beginning of our conversation. So be sure to, listen, because he gives us a very nice gift. Also, just real quick, like I said, no camp today or tomorrow, open to the public on the 6th, and then joint practice on the 8th. So I'm pretty sure they are traveling on Thursday, joint practice with the Bears, and then Sunday, 1 o'clock, the preseason game. I will be live for that. We're going to watch it together. It's going to be a blast. Yeah. And then next week, 2 joint practices, 13th, 14th. So they'll probably go from Chicago to Detroit. Next Saturday, we have Detroit Lions game. Then I'm heading down to Miami for training camp 20th and 21st. And then the last preseason game is the 23rd. We are getting very close to the start of the season. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to go over and check out the podcast. Again, if you're listening to this, you're listening to it on the podcast, go over, check out the YouTube channel to see the visual aspect of it. And also shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Clean the World with my man, Sean Seipler, who I will be hanging out with on the 20th and the 21st. So if you see us and want to come hang out, say hi, ask Sean about Clean the World, which is a great foundation that he started, as well as the Wash Foundation that helps get people clean drinking water. He helps people, the homeless, natural disasters, third world countries. He's been doing this for 16 years. Many different, millions of people, so many countries, can't even name. Go check it out, cleantheworld.org. But without further ado, let's get into what me and Warren had to talk about, and I will see you tomorrow with another video. But like usual, stay classy and fins up. Got the one and only Warren Sharp here to chat Miami Dolphins football and possibly other football. Warren, thank you so much for giving me the time to come on and chat.
Definitely. Miami Dolphins, one of the more intriguing teams, seemingly last several years, polarizing teams with, Tyreek Hill and Tua and the personalities and the injury related stuff that's involved there. So it's an interesting team to talk about. And certainly, I know you guys are looking to try to get back on track here some way, somehow, shape or form. So we'll see what happens this season.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know, Warren Sharp every year does this fantastic preview book. So this year's 2025 football preview has literally everything you can ask for. It's got team chapters in it, fantasy football, Vegas odds, coaching, front office stuff. Like, you have so much in this book. How do you get the time to sit down? And it's like the NFL Bible, I want to call it. How do you get the time to sit down and do all this stuff? It's crazy.
Yeah, this is what it looks like in the printed form, which you can get up on Amazon. This is 586 pages worth, a chapter on every single team. And it's just about dedicating the time and the resources. And so I start working on it in early March, late February. And I've got a good template down of what I want to look at, how I want to look at it. I love to compare year over year data. Mm-hmm. I like to look at how teams have changed. And it's just so, just follow the recipe of what was a team last year. Forget the record. I toss out the John Madden quote, "You are what your record says you are." I don't care about what your record was. What were you actually as a team? What has changed since that point in time? Coaching, personnel, starts with the coaching because that's what happens first. Then you get into free agency. Then you get into the draft. Then you get into what did the league do as it relates to your NFL schedule that they give you in May. And so it kind of just works its way through, and it's a lot of hours. It's a lot of time. But I'll tell you what, if you guys haven't gotten the book yet this year, which I'm sure some of you have, but if you haven't, you can get this on Amazon, but you can also get the PDF up at my website if you go to sharp.football. And it's normally $35 there now. That's the price. You can get it for $1 with the code TUA. TUA, enter the code TUA. And it's an appropriate code because he's one of my favorite topics, favorite quarterbacks to discuss, just because of all the shade that gets thrown his way and all the controversy that tends to surround him. So let's go with Tua as the code, and you get the book just for $1 up at sharp.football.
Go grab yourself the book. I will put the link in the description. Let's jump off by talking about Tua Tagovailoa because he is a very hot topic, especially for this Miami Dolphins team, because it seems like a bunch of the success depends on him because of how he runs this team. Do you have some type of analytic of with him on the field versus with him off the field? Because obviously we see it with our own eyes how much the team performs with and without him. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. If you look at last season, 6 games, Tua missed. The offense averaged minus 0.23 EPA per play, 36% success, 4.5 yards per play. Those three analytics rank 32, 31, and 32 respectively. Worst in the NFL, basically the worst offense in the NFL. The moment he steps out on the field, this becomes an average to above average offense. They were averaging plus 0.4 EPA, 45% success, 5.4 yards per play. Now, a lot of his snaps were with a massively beat up offensive line, as you guys well know. And so that was a big factor as to why some of those numbers I'm saying average to above average. But when his line is healthy, this is one of the best offenses in the NFL from an efficiency perspective, from a passing perspective. Naturally, the run game suffered a lot last year. We might get into discussing that. But if you look at just Tua himself as a quarterback over the last 3 years, top 5 in all the critical passing statistics. In 2024, he ranked number 4 in EPA and number 3 in success passing the football. In 2023, the year before, number 2 in both EPA and success. The year before that, 2022, number 2 and number 5 EPA and success rate. He is the only quarterback in the NFL to rank top 5 in both EPA and success rate in each of the last 3 years. The only quarterback in the NFL. So, a lot of people think that also he's probably the only quarterback who could have success behind this offensive line, in my opinion. I feel very much so that the team has neglected the offensive line to some extent. It's the 27th most expensive this year. They've invested the 3rd least amount of capital into the offensive line since 2022. And it's in part because they believe with Tua's quick release and with Mike McDaniel's system that they can get away with that. But it ends up showing itself in the run game being problematic, in the depth. We know offensive linemen do get injured. Every single team is going to lose some of those guys. And when your starters go down and you have just nobody there really to step in, it's very difficult for any quarterback to have a lot of success. But the fact is, I just rattled off those numbers. The 3rd cheapest offensive line since 2022, and Tua is the only quarterback in the NFL to rank top 5 every single season in EPA and success rate passing the football. Pretty remarkable for a guy that just gets absolutely very little credit on the national stage.
Seriously, yeah. And a lot of people like to put everything on him, which, I'm not going to sit here and say he doesn't deserve some type of blame, but that you talked about the whole John Madden quote. A lot of people look at can't beat playoff teams and they put that on Tua. Do you think that's a fair, do you think a win-loss record should be put on the quarterback?
I think the statistics in those types of games should be put on the quarterback, and nothing ties more closely to a record than does the quarterback's statistics in a game. Now, turnovers, obviously quarterbacks are responsible for the interceptions they throw. Now, they aren't necessarily responsible for the fumbles that their teammates might have, or the opposing team's interceptions or fumbles that they may have. So, the quarterback's controlling 1/4 of the overall picture here from a turnover perspective. That's the biggest and most deciding statistic as it relates to wins and losses is turnover margin. But beyond that, quarterback performance is vital. And I do tend to look a little bit at quarterback wins and losses strictly from the fact of this is going to be very tightly correlated to a quarterback's performance.
Mhm.
It's certainly not like an end all be all. And if you don't have stats to help support your argument there, like if a quarterback is performing great, but he hasn't won a lot of games, and that's because his defense ranks dead last in the NFL, and his run game is 20 fumbles on the season, then like you obviously can't fault the quarterback for not winning enough games, but people still will. People
Yeah.
still will go out there and fault the quarterback for not winning enough games. But it's better to use that metric if the stats correlate closely with the quarterback wins and losses.
Yeah, and a prime example of that is Joe Burrow last year. He was fantastic, but the team just wasn't good. And like you said, they had a bad defense, and a lot of people like to lump that in. Like if you're talking the head coach Mike McDaniel, then yes, you can essentially put wins and losses on
Right.
him. But to put it just solely on the quarterback, I always thought was funny, especially last
That's
year. Good.
that's one of the most frustrating things that I have taken out of the offseason narrative and what I've researched as it relates to. Unfortunately, it's a lot of quarterbacks in the AFC specifically, but as it relates to Tua, as it relates to Lamar Jackson, as it relates to Joe Burrow, as it relates to Josh Allen, all these quarterbacks are performing really well. Now, obviously, I would have Tua below those other
Yeah.
three quarterbacks. Those three quarterbacks are like three of the top five, three of the top four quarterbacks in the NFL, along with Patrick Mahomes. There is so much vitriol and hatred and just irrational discourse around these quarterbacks because they can't ultimately win enough playoff games and get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. And so because of that, they're bad. Because of that, they've got a fatal flaw. Because of that, they're terrible or they're never going to get it done. And to me, that's insanity because you have a team in the AFC who has one of the best coaches in the NFL and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, not just of modern day, but of all time. In my opinion, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes working together with a defense coordinator who is good enough to be a head coach in Steve
Yeah.
Spagnuolo, but chooses to stay there because he just loves it and wants to be part of the ride. It's very difficult to beat that team and go to the Super Bowl and then win a Super Bowl. And so just because Lamar Jackson fails or just because Joe Burrow fails, Joe Burrow's defense is terrible. His O-line is terrible. His run game is terrible. He has no support from any of those. Josh Allen, his defense has been terrible, especially in the postseason, especially against the Kansas City Chiefs when they lose these games. Just because these guys don't end up winning the Super Bowl each year, only one of them can even make the Super Bowl in the AFC. It's just irrational, in my opinion, to just fault the quarterbacks to a T when so much of the team's ability to even be in those positions where they're in critical games and they're playing for those types of moments is because of what the quarterback has done all season long and what the quarterback has done to put them there because those quarterbacks are playing extremely, extremely well. So it just bothers me a lot that those are the types of quarterbacks who actually have decent statistics, who actually play really well, who are actually some of the best that we will see in our lifetime. And yet we just rip on them because they haven't been able to win a Super Bowl. It's just nonsense to me.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that because it's all put on one person, but you can pinpoint games where the quarterback, like last year against Buffalo in Buffalo, Tua had a fantastic game, marched them down the field, scored a game tying touchdown. They lost off a 61-yard field goal, and people will still say Tua can't beat the Bills. It's
Right.
this narrative that's out there, and like you said, you look at the statistics, and not necessarily is always on the quarterback. um, Talking about the schedule, there's something very interesting with this schedule that I saw about the rest period. I forgot what you call it, where the amount of rest that the Dolphins will get versus their opponents, and how I think the Dolphins are like second in the NFL when it comes to that.
Yeah, net rest edge is the metric, and the Dolphins. I'm pulling it up here for this upcoming season. The Dolphins have the second best net rest edge this year. They have 3 games with a rest advantage. They play their bye week is not negated. They just play one of the best schedules from a rest perspective. And as I'm looking at it from a detailed basis, you guys go the biggest rest edges that are important to have are those rest edges where it's a 3 to 4 day rest edge on those
Mm,
mini buys. When you
mm,
get into a full bye week, because of the time that you're forced to give your team off from a coaching staff, some of these guys nowadays, this is only from the new CBA onward, they get out of rhythm, they get
mm,
their focus is elsewhere. It's hard to get them back on track and actually win and execute games. So those aren't necessarily the ones that have the best advantage, but you guys play only 2 games this year where you are at plus or minus 3 days or 4 days of rest edge. And in both cases, they're going in your favor and might be able to help considerably. Week 4 against the New York Jets, you are a +3 rest edge on Monday Night Football at home. And then week 10 in a big rematch game against the Buffalo Bills, because you'll
mm,
play them earlier that year. Week 10, you're +3 rest days of advantage in week 10. So you only play the only games that you guys have where you're at a rest disadvantage are just 1 day rest disadvantage. 1 day against the Panthers after a Monday night game and 1 day against the Bengals after a Monday night game. And that Bengals game at least is at home for you
mm.
guys late in the season. Otherwise, you're +3 in one game, +3 in one game, and +7 in one game. So things are looking up for you guys from a rest perspective. It doesn't ensure or guarantee anything by any means, but it definitely is a benefit because the NFL controls your rest. The NFL
Mm.
does not control who you play. They control when you play those teams. And that then factors into the rest. And they're not always looking at the rest as a first and foremost priority when they set the schedule, which is why some teams get screwed and have
Yeah.
negative 20 days of net rest because they're not really focused on that. But for you guys for this season, you've got an advantage and you got to try to make it count for something.
Yeah, especially because, we're what, 8 days into training camp, and Miami already lost Cater Kohu, and a bunch of our corners are already banged up. So it's like it's a thing that the Dolphins go through where, 2023 fell apart because of the injuries. And to see that we have such a rest advantage, hopefully, puts us in that situation where, we can do something late in the stretch. You talked about offensive line and how for the past 3 years we've kind of negated it. How big of a factor did that take into, obviously we talked about Tua, but the run game and kind of the success of the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely first and foremost, if you look at your lead running back, and one of the things that really stood out to me, when you're going to give a guy a lot more touches because
Mm,
Mostert's out of the picture. And so you bring a guy who was a spot guy who got some of the change of pace stuff, and now he's your main guy. You're going to have less explosives. But if you look at A-Chain in his 2023 season, he ranked number 1 in rate of 5+ yard runs, number 1 in rate of 12+ yard runs. And the ridiculous statistic was his rushing yards over expected. He was plus 2.9 rushing yards over expected. The second best player was plus 1.3, and that was Christian McCaffrey. So you're talking about a massive jump from what he was doing. So if you look at like an average run, a running back on average 4.2 yards per carry. If you put Christian McCaffrey on that average run, you get 5.5 yards per carry. If you put Devin A-Chain on that, he would get 7.1 yards per carry in 2023, which is absolutely ridiculous. That dropped from plus 2.9 in 2023 down to negative 0.5 last year. His average rushing yards, based on what was viewed as being blocked up by player tracking of the offensive linemen and the closest defenders and things of that nature, he was averaging fewer yards than expected in that situation. He was worse than Javonte Williams. He was worse than DeAndre Swift. He was worse than Kareem Hunt. Like some of these guys that just aren't good backs, aren't nearly as talented or young, as explosive as he is. So a little bit on him, but a lot on that offensive line, if
yeah.
we're being fair. I mean, this offensive line, the run game completely fell apart. I think I have a metric here on what happened to the run game. Yeah, the run game, especially in short yardage situations, you guys just couldn't convert anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
3rd and 4th, with 1 to 2 yards to go, you averaged a let's see here, 31st in first down rate, 31st in EPA per rush, minus 0.48 EPA per rush on 3rd and 4th down with 1 to 2 yards to go. 46% of your running back runs in short yardage were stuffed for no gain. That was the worst rate of any team since 2019. You can't have a Mike McDaniel offense
No.
or a Kyle Shanahan offense, any types of these offenses where you get no support from the run game, like where you cannot count on just simply getting a short yardage situation. A lot of times you guys are going to be playing for these short yardage situations,
Mm.
setting up the ability to convert in short yardage. And if you have a run game that is the worst short yardage run game since 2019, you're not going to win very many games. It's going to put far too much pressure on Tua himself. So certainly this was an issue last season. Your health is going to improve. I don't know that the talent is going to get the improvement that you need to really get back to the top of the NFL. But hopefully it's going to be better than last year, because last year was just inexcusable.
Yeah, seriously. And you hit the nail on the head when it came to, a lot of people look at Tua and think everything needs to be perfect around him. Not necessarily. You just need to give him a run game. Like, you have I know the Dolphins last year were like second in the NFL in seeing cover two, and they were like dead last seeing cover one because they didn't care about stopping the run. We had no run game. So then they just dropped their safeties, and that's where, all of our deep passes just disappeared. You got to just have that run game going so the play action works and all that other stuff works, and Tua can do his thing. And it's a big thing that happened. And it seems like the Dolphins kind of addressed that, bringing in Madison, bringing in Ollie Gordon. Do you have any data on Madison? Because I know he was really good at short yardage situations.
Not off the tip of my tongue as it relates to him in short yardage situations. I'd have to dig something up for
No.
that. And maybe I could share that when you share the pod. I'll chime in and tweet out some of the stats for Madison in short yardage. But I think A-Chain should be proficient. The short yardage to me is more so like, what is the offensive line doing? What is
Yeah.
the push that offensive line is getting? I feel like that's a little bit more of an offensive line stat than a individual running back. Now, certainly the bigger backs, the stronger backs, the backs that fall forward, as they say, those are the guys that are going to be able to gain those tough yards. The guys that spend too much time behind line of scrimmage, don't have good vision, trying to dart through whatever hole they see, like, and just too patient or indecisive
Oh,
are the types of backs that are going to struggle a little bit more. But that offensive line simply needs to be able to get that explosion off the line of scrimmage to get a little bit of push, and then let your running back do the rest. I mean, we're talking about a yard. It's really not that much when it comes down to it. And you don't have the advantage with Tua of tush pushes, right? Like,
yeah.
let's just be clear. There's a
Mhm.
not many teams in the AFC, although Josh Allen does it a little bit kind of different than what the Eagles do, obviously, but you don't have the advantage of those hacks.
Yeah.
That's a massive hack in short yardage, is just running the tush push. The
Mm.
Philadelphia Eagles have that. They get to have it again this season. You guys don't. And even if you're not utilizing a tush push per se,
Mm.
a quarterback sneak is a great edge to use. And you guys probably shouldn't be quarterback sneaking it much either with Tua's health
Mm.
situation. So you don't have any of those edges. One team that I would look at if you're struggling in short yardage, look at the Washington Commanders last
Mm.
year. The Washington Commanders converted 87% of their fourth downs. Most of them were in short yardage situations without running a single quarterback sneak. They didn't
Wow.
tush push. They didn't run a single quarterback sneak, set a record for 87% conversion rate. Look at some of the creative ways that they were calling some runs to see if you can adapt anything there into the Dolphins offense in 2025. But certainly improving in those situations is going to be vital. And maybe it's Madison, maybe it's the offensive line, maybe it's play calling.
Yeah, and with Tua, he was doing them, the quarterback sneaks, but then, like you said, once he got that concussion, they stopped having him do it would be just asinine to have him shove his head into
Yeah,
defenders
irresponsible.
coming at but yeah, great breakdown. Last thing I want to ask you is about the Dolphin defense. For me, the defense has always been just kind of middle of the pack. Last year it wasn't bad, but it wasn't also great as well. I feel like there's some games the Dolphins lost because of the defense. What is your takes on the Dolphins defense?
I'm concerned. I'm concerned. We are a little bit lower, my guys ranking the front seven than probably you guys are.
Uh,
I know that Seiler and some of your other talent up front feel like it's an above average front seven, but the secondary is the concern.
yeah.
We agree the secondary is a concern, and here's just like a even more concerning evaluation of the secondary. We ranked them as the 27th best secondary in the NFL. And that was before they got rid of Jalen Ramsey. And I know they added Minka Fitzpatrick in exchange. And that was before, obviously, Kohu went out with the season ending injury. So we already had you borderline bottom five. And so it's going to be theoretically a problem for you guys on the
Mhm.
back end. And the struggle with the back end, I'm looking at your strength of schedule here. Last year, by my metrics, I showed that your secondary played the fifth easiest schedule of opposing pass offenses. You are
Mhm.
now going to play, so that's the 28th hardest, fifth easiest, 28th hardest. You're going to move from 28th hardest up to 18th hardest. So right around league average, but it is a bit of a jump from what you were playing last season. And here's the biggest thing for, thinking about trying to win games. If you don't have if you're fortunate enough to build a lead, I think all coaches need to be extremely aggressive out the gates to try to build a lead. You want to build
Mhm.
a first quarter lead. More importantly, you want to build a lead at halftime. You want to make that other team go into the locker room and think, we got to get desperate. We got to try something different. Nothing's working. So they abandon some of their other things and they try to go high risk, high reward. And a lot of times it's going to backfire, which is why teams that lead at halftime end up winning the vast majority of games, because they're the better teams and they're able to force other opponents to get more desperate and more predictable on that side of the ball. But if you are fortunate enough for the Dolphins to have a lead at halftime, here's the big concern. What would therefore then you be doing more in the second half or seeing more? You'd be trying to run the football a little bit more. But if
Mhm.
your run game stinks, then that's not going to be very successful. And what's the
Mhm.
other team going to be doing? Trailing. They're going to be passing the ball more. And if your secondary stinks, those pass attempts are probably going to be more successful. So it's going to be harder for a team to close out games if you build a lead, if you have a bad secondary, and if you have a bad run game. And that's my only fear. I think your run game can be successful this
Mhm.
year. It's going to be more successful than it was last year. But you have to have, I mean, football, we could talk just defense, but it all is
Yeah.
interconnected as it relates to winning games. You've got to figure out how to help and bail out your secondary a little bit so that it doesn't become a focal point of opposing attacks, which it will if you guys are leading late in games. And so therefore you got to have a better run game, support, keep the ball away from the opponent, keep drives alive, keep drives moving down the field in the second half when you're running the ball to score points. It all relates to one another. So I am worried about the secondary. Bottom line, I am worried about the secondary. How do you feel in general about the secondary heading into this season?
It still worries me. The additions we made of Mike Hilton and Jack Jones is seems like a band-aid. Like it seems like it'll be okay. It's nothing like it was when we had Jalen and Xavier Howard. I feel like that was, we felt much better back then. Last year I went into the season worried about the offensive line. This year I'm worried about the secondary. It's like
Okay.
it's completely flipped where we had Chris Greer telling us Dolphin fans, you're more worried about the offensive line than we are. We saw how that panned out. And then now they're waiting until training camp to make additions in the secondary. And it's just like it's maybe a little too late. So it seems like what they're trying to do is have that front seven give enough pressure that the secondary doesn't get beat so bad. But you can very easily, counteract that by just quick passes. And if you can't get jammed at the line of scrimmage, you're gonna get beat. So, it is worrying the crap out of me, the secondary. And um last thing I want to ask you, looking at the Miami Dolphins going into 2025 versus 2024, what's your overall feeling of this team?
Um, I am still a buyer in Tua. It's always a question of health, but when he's
Yes.
out on the field, the team wins game. When he's
Yes.
out on the field, he's delivering. And so as a result, I feel good. I'm wondering how much the health issues for Tyreek impacted his upside last year. It doesn't get a lot of discussion, but I think it is an obvious factor, and I'm hopeful that he is going to be able to perform better for you guys this season. I think from a skill perspective, you guys had more talent to win more games last year than you actually showed. And so maybe that regresses in a positive manner. You're not going to have your offensive line, just from a talent perspective, your offensive line just isn't there. So can you work around it yet again? Tua yet again working around it. Mike McDaniel yet again working around it so that you guys can pull off some of those wins. I mean, right now your win total is 8.5. I'm looking at your overall schedule. Last year, my metrics showed you played the second easiest schedule of opponents. This year, it's obviously going to be a little bit more difficult, but it's still not one of the most difficult schedules in the NFL. I have got you playing a slightly below league average schedule. I'm trying to scroll through the pages of my book here. The chapter's too long on the Dolphins to find your exact strength of schedule here. I'm trying to just pull it up here. Okay, here it is. I'm sure you got the 9th easiest schedule overall based on win totals. It's a winnable schedule. Your win total is 8.5. I view you right around in that range. The question mark becomes as it gets later in the year, and I know this is, sometimes who the quarterback is and whatnot, but these stats, I'm sorry, I got to share them because it does factor in. At home, you're 16-6 from December onward since 2017. That's a 7.27 win rate. On the road, you're 5-15. That's 0.250 win rate. You've got to figure out a way to win some of those games because you do play 3 games from December onward in the Northeast. You're going to play in Pittsburgh, in New England, and in New York against the Jets. So you got to win those games when the weather isn't as warm, and you have struggled to do that in the past. But if you can do that, to me, the schedule is reasonable enough if the injuries don't play a role that you're going to be right there on the wild card picture. I still obviously have the Buffalo Bills winning this division. I have the Buffalo Bills going over their win total. I think the Bills are in a great situation and they also have a very easy schedule. I don't have a lot of faith in Justin Fields and what they're building in New York this season. I don't like their ownership. I don't like their general direction. They're still a fine team. They're still a good team. They're going to be difficult to beat, but I think you guys have the upper hand there. The question is the New England Patriots. The market's super high on the Patriots. I think unreasonably high at this point. I'm shocked to see that the New England Patriots are favored in 11 games this year. You guys are favored in 6 games this year. So you are favored in 6 games, underdogs in 11. The Patriots are favored in 11 games, underdogs in 6. Let that sink in for a second. The Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots, they're favored in 11. You're favored in 6, a total inverse. That to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think you guys are better than that. I don't think they're as good as that yet. And so that remains to be seen. I love what they're doing, trying to build in the right direction, bringing in offensive line, bringing in a new head coach, bringing in a better play caller. All those things are obviously improvements for them. So I think it's going to matter, but I don't think it's going to flip the switch for them that big this year. So the bottom line is there's opportunities for you guys this season from a schedule-based perspective, from a rest perspective, which you mentioned early on in this discussion. There are opportunities for the Dolphins this year. It's a matter of health and working around some of the impediments. And, at some point, it sucks, but Mike McDaniel has to figure out a way to work around. You can't work around the loss of Tua. You can't blame the fact that he can't win games with Skylar Thompson as the reason that Mike McDaniel is a bad head coach. But as long as Tua is there, you've got to win those games and you got to work around the bad offensive line. It just is what it is. The front office isn't giving him the support that he needs there to have a better offensive line. How are you still going to win games? How are you going to still do something? Because I know Dolphins fans have been desperate for a while to try to get a product out there on the field that actually makes them proud, helps. You guys are winning games late in the year. You guys are feeling good about something that you can do in the postseason. And I don't know that this is the season that's going to make you feel that way, but I just hope it's a healthy season and it's a productive season because I think Tua deserves that. I think
Yeah.
he deserves to be viewed as the quarterback that the statistics show that he is. But right now, he just doesn't get that type of respect on the national stage.
Yeah, I agree. Very great insight, Warren. Thank you so much for giving me the time. Go get the book, use the promo code TUA. You get it for $1. It is worth so much more than $1, but go support Warren. You can also follow him on Twitter at Sharp Football. You got anything else going on besides the book?
No, that's it. Pretty much just trying to talk to people about some of the research and the insights that I found. I always try to dig up new things that people, it's not on the tips of people's tongues. It's not the first thing that, or second thing, or third thing that comes to mind when they're thinking about their team. I'm always trying to uncover some things because I know people of all levels are going to be reading this book, are going to be taking something from this book. So, there are guys in front offices in places that read through this book, and I want to try to find something that they might not have thought about their team, whether it's a team build perspective, it's a play calling perspective that they can do. So I put a lot of work into that. And then now I'm looking at, the futures market. I'm looking at
Mhm.
betting. Some of the guys at my website, Sharp Football Analysis, they're looking at fantasy football and their draft strategies, and they're traveling different places each weekend to go to these big drafts. And I don't really participate in that. I'm just locked into kind of like some of the futures markets right now. And then, of course, watching these preseason games, which got started and are going to be, if the Hall of Fame game is any indication, this preseason is going to be wild. We saw,
Yeah.
the new measurement system. We saw fumbles. We saw interceptions. We saw like every single play under the sun was there on that Hall of Fame game. It's going to be a fun preseason and obviously leading into an outstanding 2025 season. So I can't wait.
Appreciate you stopping by, Warren.
Thanks for having me.